Standing up in McKinney, this is According to Callus. Another bonus episode, if you will. Episode 742. I was going to call it What Culture with a question mark, but I figured the guys over at YouTube might have a fit because I have a channel called What Culture. So I'm going to go with What Culture Has Been. That's going to be my title, if you will. Before we get there, we'll just take a moment and remind you that every little bit helps. Like, share, subscribe to this here podcast. Go back and listen to the older ones. I mean, there's well over 700 plus episodes of good, one I think is good material at least. Today, well, again, you can follow me on the podcatcher of your choice, whether it's over at Amazon, Google, or iTunes. Not to mention Podbean, Stitcher, and a couple others that I can't think of at the moment. That being said, you can find me on social media as well. Come and join us, right? Like, share, follow, subscribe to the page or the group, whatever floats your boat. We're on Facebook, got a page in a group. I'm a pro at Gab. I drop in at MeWe. Have a Twitter account that I haven't figured out what to do with yet. And for now, you can still find me on YouTube, which is why I had to make sure I altered my title. All right, so I've got two different angles that come together to give me my content for today. So earlier today, I was listening to Brian McClanahan. He was talking about Southern culture and a fellow by the name of Richard Weaver. And it struck me as, you know, a Yankee, born and raised in the Midwest, an assimilated Southerner in Texas, if you will. There's a whole lot I don't know or I'm not aware of. And it seems to me that a lot of the South or a lot of Texas has been lost by the influx of damn Yankees, myself included. Now, unlike a lot of folks that come here from other states, setting the political stuff aside, the cultural thing was I wanted to become a Southerner. I wanted to become a Texan. I left most of my Midwestern stuff back in the Midwest. I will admit I prefer being able to get a sub sandwich. I enjoy having my frozen custard. And as far as I'm concerned, kolaches are a poor substitute for a good German bakery. That being said, I don't lose sleep over any of that. I have more on this. But I have more to say about this, but we'll get there. The other thing that I saw, and I want to be careful how I reference this, only because I know some people only see one thing. So there are folks in South Africa that, let's just say, have a very unpleasant life there, and they're looking to get out. And it's not politically correct or acceptable to note the fact that they're minority white folk. And they have to leave, or they feel like they have to leave. And one of the things that has not been lost on me is there is the city or town culture in South Africa where there isn't near the threat, if you will. It's an entirely different culture. So the Afrikaners, or however you pronounce that, or even the English descendants there, right? They fit in differently. But if you're a farmer or you're a rancher and you live out in the hinterlands, they're bandits, and you're a good target. Now, is the reason that you're a good target because you're white or because you're rich or both? Don't know. Quite frankly, I don't care. I don't live there. It's not anything pressing. But what I found very interesting is there are people arguing for the plight of these folks and that they should leave, that they're refugees, if you will. And then there are others that laugh it off and say there's no threat and it's not real. I suspect the truth is somewhere in between. And why do I bring this up? To me, it directly relates to what's playing out in the Middle East right now. Nobody wanted the Palestinians. They were put upon Israel. Israel's done with the Palestinians, and they're reacting in a way that the angry old man neighbor down the street might do to a meddling kid, which is overreacting and crossing a lot of lines. And again, I know nothing about what's going on there. And to a degree, I don't care. I don't live there. It doesn't affect me. I don't have a strong opinion other than if you're killing people because you don't like their God or you don't like what they look like or the language that they speak, that's kind of a universal problem in humanity. But it goes both ways. And again, the Israelis are putting out that, the percentage of civilians killed is the lowest ever. And the Palestinians are putting out, they're wiping us out. It's a genocide. Again, I don't know. Not my business. But I suspect the truth is somewhere in between. It's entirely possible to have two people or two sides telling a story about what's happening. And they both think they're being truthful, but they're not telling you the whole story. So in both instances, both what's playing out in South Africa and what's playing out in the Middle East, have two polar opposite ideas of what's playing on or what's playing out in front of us. Why do I bring this up? I think after listening to Brian McClanahan's show today, and he was talking about the loss of Southern culture. And he kind of separated the idea Southern agrarianism and just the old South. And in some ways, the blame or the shift goes on the Union Army basically destroying it. And the method of assimilation afterwards was basically forcing people to adopt the Yankee culture, the dominant Northern culture, if you will. Now, I don't think this fully played out, at least until my lifetime. So this is where, and this is why I'm drawing the corollary. So you've got one side telling one story and the other side telling another story. And they're entirely different points of view. But somewhere in between is the truth. Now, is it 70-30, 60-40? I don't really know. I wasn't there. I will say it does matter to me, and I do care because it is where I live. I live in Texas, and I'm a proud Texian. So it matters. And I'd like to know at least as close to the truth as possible. So now that I've said that, and I've given you two real-world current examples of why this can get out of hand, let me rewind a bit. We're going to jump in that Wayback Machine. We're going to go back about 45 years. Talking about an 8-year-old Stephen wandering around on the streets of an inner belt suburb of the city of Milwaukee. Now, I'm going to do my best to paint you a picture off the top of my head of what it was like to grow up in, let's say, the late 70s of inner belt suburb, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We had an actual main street. Now, it was clearly past its prime, but on that main street, you had the city hall. You had a JCPenney store, and we'll revisit that in a minute because to me that's just kind of a bellwether. You had a Woolworth, a Walgreens, and I'm talking like old school Walgreens. And for those of you that don't know what Woolworth is or was, strongly recommend you go look that up. It was very interesting. And we had a whole bunch of little storefronts. And what's also interesting to me is almost every one of those buildings was 2 or 3 stories tall. And the business was on the first floor facing the main road. And there were apartments or dwellings or offices up on the second or third floor. Also interspersed in this was lots of little pubs or let's call them town bars, not great big discotheque bars or, party club bars, but like hole in the wall, 30 people are in there and it's full kind of bars. And this was possible because there was a major manufacturing outfit there that was called Allis Chalmers. Now, Allis Chalmers at one time was a major manufacturer of farm tractors. When pre-industrial farming was a thing and farmers actually purchased tractors that they would ride in and maybe have 2 or 3 of them on their farm, depending on how big it is. Now, why does this matter? Because it was a blue-collar industrial city, and I would best guess it was at its prime from about 1905 to maybe 1970 or 1965, somewhere in there. The other thing that you need to understand is there were what we would call high-density dwellings present, but they were 20-unit apartment complexes. There were 4 families. There were lots of duplexes. If you don't know what that is one family lived downstairs and another family lived upstairs. Very common, but built into a city vibe or an inner belt suburb vibe, if you will. And on the main drag, you had a number of businesses that were set up specifically to provide services to Allis Chalmers. And there were other factories that had been there, right? This was a production-based city. Blue-collar jobs were around. And there were lots of things that were dependent on Allis Chalmers being successful. Now, I lived there as Allis Chalmers declined to the point where they sold themselves off. Correspondingly, during this time, Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer, which was at one time the largest brewery in Milwaukee and in the state, collapsed upon itself. Miller Brewery kind of sort of filled that deal. And then you had Harnischwager having problems, which, again, another blue-collar job magnet, right? And lots of other major corporations that were going through things in the 70s and the early 80s. But there was a distinct culture about that town, right? It was called West Allis. And it was based in part, in theory, because it was west of Allis, meaning Allis Chalmers. It was what I would call a very modest town, but it had everything that you might need or want in town. What's interesting to me is, as we quit making things or producing things, the Midwest became the Rust Belt. These things began to collapse. They no longer were able to support the community and the cities around them. Now, when you live on the coast, or when you have a service job, you maybe don't understand what that means or how important that was. But I'm going to tell you that when you look at places like the inner city or Appalachia where people are hopeless and they have nothing and they resort to self-medication, if you will, this is the kind of scenario that was playing out. And to be fair, the town at that time was probably 90% of the people looked and sounded like me. Not uncommon for the Midwest inner belt suburb at the time. And I keep calling it a suburb. I really don't even think that is fair because it was a secondary town. It wasn't Milwaukee, but it wasn't the legitimate true suburbs. Now, there was pieces of it in the far western stretches that you might be able to classify as suburban, but most of the city was a city. You would walk to school, you walked to the grocery store, you had things that were close by. It was convenient, but it was also a small town. There was, 65,000 people in the town at the time, if I remember correctly. So there was a pretty good chance that if you were, a kid screwing around or doing stupid stuff, you were going to be seen. You're going to be seen by somebody that knew you're one of those callous kids. I have gone back many times in the nearly 29 years since I've left, and it's not the same. It's a shadow of itself. Now, one of the things to be pointed out is a number of the Catholic churches, which were preeminent and prominent at that time, have shuttered. Now, notwithstanding my affiliation with the Protestant church and no great love of Catholicism per se, I also lament the fact that I know what that means. Faith has gone to the sidelines. Catholicism is a very unique binding agent within a community, as is the rest of Christianity for that matter. And when it ceases to function, or what it doesn't provide what the community needs, the community hurts. So you look at this stuff playing out, and again, I don't have any secret knowledge. I don't know anything special here. It's just observation. You see the outcome. The culture of my town, I wouldn't say it was destroyed necessarily. What was there is gone. What is now there is, in my opinion, not as good. In some ways, there's a renaissance or a rebuilding going on in some of the other parts of my former hometown that are encouraging and that are hopeful, and they seek to bring back what was lost. But much like when the Roman Empire, collapsed, its replacement was not nearly as good. Or if you prefer, when they built the second temple, it wasn't nearly as good. Right? Now, again, I don't know all the details. I don't have any special insight here. But I give you this story because that is in my lifetime. It is a contemporary explanation of how things have changed in just my lifetime in the town I grew up in. So, I moved to Texas. I've been here not quite 30 years. When I got to McKinney, it was a small town, about 50,000 people. It had all the hallmarks of the town I grew up in. The downtown square had an old JCPenney building. Now, I want to pause here for just a second and call this a interesting insert. I'm going to try and not nerd out on this. JCPenney used to have a specific floor plan for all of their department stores, so that when you saw it, you knew what it was. And you didn't even necessarily need to sign, but you just knew. And once you got in, it was a familiar layout. And I probably commented on this in previous episodes, but to me, this is an echo of a bygone era. So on my main street in West Allis, Wisconsin, there was an almost identical JCPenney store. The building's still there. It's no longer a JCPenney's. To the one that is in downtown McKinney on the square. The building is virtually identical as far as inside and functional. Of course, neither one is a JCPenney, but that's kind of a given. But to go even one better, I'm going to take a moment here. My wife and I, shortly after we were married, traveled to Sturgeon Bay. It'd be northeast Wisconsin. And they had that same exact building. And in fact, it was still a JCPenney store at the time. I want to say this is 1993. It might have been 1994, maybe 1995, now that I think about it. But they still had a JCPenney store in this building. It was so cool because the JCPenney store that I grew up with was a JCPenney store. And so it brought back this flood of memories of how everything was in the layout. Again, it sounds ridiculous that, 8-year-old me could relate to, 25-year-old me. And now at 50 plus me, I'm thinking about this and I must feel sad for what was lost. Now, why does this matter? Where are you going, Kelsey? You burned through 20 minutes and you said nothing. Well, I'm trying to set up how this relates to the here and now. So I've given you two international things that are going on and why you can have different ideas of what played out. Referencing why I'm talking about this was Richard Weaver that was mentioned by Brian McClanahan of kind of talking about what was lost in the South in my own life and what was lost in my own lifetime. And now I'm in the South. I'm in Texas, and I look about what's transpired in less than 30 years. Now, here's the challenge. Because anytime you talk about the pre-war South, everybody checks out. You can't see past a single issue. Which, yeah, it's an awful issue. And we'll call it a stain on our history and our culture. Fine. Keep in mind, that same thing was going on in the North. And, oh, by the way, pretty much every other country that ever existed prior to the 19th century, or the 20th century for that matter. So this is not unique. It's not, the worst thing ever in history. But it isn't good. So we can't pretend that it was okay or that it didn't matter or whatever else. But within that, the underlying thing that I'm getting at here is the way things were we're going to make it 25 years ago. 25 years ago, the culture and the way things were was different than they are now. Now you have to be careful because you can't go back, right? You can want to go back all you want, but you can't. But when you go forward, do you respect what's come before you? Do you build upon what's come before you? Or do you do what the leftist progressive socialists, there's a little political angle here, but not really. Or do you do what the latest thing is, which is destroy everything that happened before today? We're starting over now new. Is that doing everybody a service? Is that what's best? I would suggest to you that what was lost in just my lifetime in my hometown is in many ways devastating. What I would suggest to you, what was lost in my new hometown in just the last 25 years is very detrimental. Now, let's talk about specifics, because this is where it gets interesting. There's been homogenization, right? When I first got here, it was a big deal to go to certain barbecue places because you couldn't find them everywhere. It was a treat to go down a Black-Eyed Pea down in Plano, and then they brought a Black-Eyed Pea up to McKinney, and that was sadly ill-fated. It was kind of a unique curiosity to be able to go to the Waffle House, and that was something unique to the South at the time. So when we look at the way things play out, and you take away the things that make your city or your town unique or special, or create the culture that is there, when you homogenize everything, is the community really benefiting? I would suggest to you, based upon the macro at the international level, based upon my own life, maybe. It's a maybe. Maybe there's some benefits. But we also need to not neglect the costs. And the way some of this plays out is they incentivize larger companies to move in or chain operations to move in. In fact, they give them benefits to moving to town. The same benefits that they don't give to mom and pop or that they don't give to the small business that already exists. Now, you can argue that, we need more. We need more capacity. And that may be true, but you're also picking winners and losers. If you're going to give lots of money or tax incentives to Big Box 1 or Big Box 2 to bring them in, you're giving them an unfair advantage over somebody that's already here. I mean, when I got here, we had Groom and Son over on Virginia. Now, if I needed something specific or I needed help figuring something out, that was my go-to place. Now, Home Depot was closer to my house. Home Depot had pretty much everything I needed. But again, if I needed something special or I needed help figuring something out, there really wasn't anybody at the Home Depot that could help me back then. I don't think things have changed that much. big box stores are great, and typically the prices are a little bit cheaper, typically. But at the end, who really benefits? I mean, yeah, the shareholders, right? Some retirement funds, they get their profits. But is your community served well? Are you served well? I think that's a fair question, especially when you look at what did you have to do to incentivize them to come into town. And I'm not picking on Home Depot per se. It's something that's relevant to my life. I mean, I've gone to Home Depot many times. I've spent lots of money at Home Depot. Not as much as some, but probably more than the average would be my guess. I don't hate the company. I don't dislike anything about it. It's just an example. Likewise, it's fun to say what might be better, what might be unique, what would improve the city. But you can't go back. We should have honored what was here, yes, but you can't undo what's already happened. So, again, a practical application in the here and now. Now the underlying concern. If culture is important and culture matters, how do you protect it and how do you respect it? If you're always looking for the new, if you're always disrespecting what has come before you, you're not prepared to benefit from that knowledge, that built-in cultural memory, if you will. So how do you honor that? How do you make the most of what's already there? That's the trick, right? So when you're looking at the world around us, whether it's McKinney or Collin County or just all of Texas, how do you honor those that came before us? How do you respect how we got to be here today? It's super easy to dismiss everything because they didn't know then what we know now. They were bad because they did this or they did that. But realistically, let's consider something. Are you prepared to say we're a more moral and put together society now in 2025 than what we were in, say, 1960? I know there's a good argument to be had there. That's not the topic for today. But are you prepared to also then acknowledge what was lost in those 65 years? I don't think a lot of people actually know what was lost or can fathom what the depths were of the rejection of the culture that came before you. Is it possible? Is it possible that there's something that could have been lost that we need to relearn? In the remaining couple of minutes here, I want you to ask yourself, do you think that it is appropriate to show respect and professional courtesy to people that you don't know? Do you think it's appropriate and perhaps professional to open doors or hold doors for people, particularly those of the opposite sex? Do you think it's a loss that people don't address people as ma'am or sir anymore? Do you think that something was lost when it became acceptable to wear flip-flops and shorts and a torn t-shirt to go to church on Sunday? Now, before you think I'm throwing rocks at people, before you think I'm dismissing, just keep in mind, those things are not just socially acceptable. In many cases, they're celebrated. Now, I'm not going to get too terribly upset by them because, quite frankly, I was guilty of many of those same things, except for maybe the torn t-shirt and flip-flops, until I was in my mid-30s. Maybe you just got to grow out of it. Maybe you see things a different way when you get mature. But is it also possible that it's been acceptable for young men to not mature? I can't tell you how many young men I've run across that are sub 30 that still play video games in the evening rather than, I don't know, go out. I don't know what the thing is to do anymore. It's Probably not bowling, probably not playing darts. I mean, I'm not sure hanging out in a bar all night's any better than playing video games all night, but it's weird. Maybe there's not a value on interaction or a culture of communication. How do you recover that? How do you show the importance of it? Certainly that's been lost in my lifetime. And when you think that everything's not connected, I think it is, because you would meet people out there that think things are much better. They're significantly improved. I don't have to go anywhere or do anything. I can order everything online. I can never leave my house. How great is this? They talk about it as the atomizing of community, which in my mind is probably a logical outgrowth of homogenizing society, right? If everything's the same everywhere you go, then what's the point in going anywhere? I've seen one, I've seen them all. I don't know. I mean, if you doubt me, just look at the way the new design of Whataburger is. It's virtually indistinguishable from every other hamburger shop down the road. And you don't even have to love Whataburger to just understand what I'm talking about. I mean, the golden arches used to actually mean something. And that's just fast food, which is already a homogenization. Well, I've kind of gone over, and I'll freely admit this is loosely connected here, but it was just something that's been on my mind for the last day or two. And I wanted to share it, and what the heck, it's a bonus episode, so why not? And it's related to home, right? McKinney, Texas as a whole, to a degree, and the rest of the country for that matter. Maybe we'll build a little bit more on this on another special episode, but for now, that's all. And as always, I will see you on the other side.
Wanted. Young men to rebuild Western civilization. Must be unafraid of pain, blisters, intellectual rigor, and a lifetime of long shifts with swords and shovels, digging ditches, repelling invaders, and reading stacks of books taller than their fathers. Must be impervious to manipulative women of all sorts, giggling virgins, cyber skanks, and even full cauldrons of Karens or hand-wringing clergy, but always seeking to hear and heed the words of Lady Wisdom. Immune to the leadership of hypocrites and LARPing online masculinitats, unaffected by abusive authorities, petty professors, and all brokers of official respectability. Willing to hoist the Jolly Roger and Johnny Cash's favorite finger whenever faced with idolatry. Long-suffering joy and determination required. Must be willing to dwell among the tombs and graves of the long dead, seeking truths that cannot die. Exhaustion guaranteed. Conflict guaranteed. Mortality guaranteed. New St. Andrews College. Liberal arts for the undaunted.